When I refused to pay my brother's $64,000 debt, my parents said I was never their son. So I took everything they secretly built on my name, and when my mom sent that family dinner text, I already had one foot out the door. It wasn't even subtle, just this overly cheerful Friday, 7 p.m., no excuses, family meeting, like I was back in high school being summoned to explain a B minus. I should have ignored it. Should have gone to the game with my friends and grabbed beers after. But something about her tone made me show up. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe guilt, maybe just a dumb reflex that hadn't been beaten out of me yet. So I drove to their house in Milford, pulled up to the same cracked driveway I used to shovel during winter break, and immediately saw Colby's beater truck parked sideways, blocking two spots like always. Of course he was already here. Probably needed a ride and guilt Mom into it. I walked in and immediately knew something was off. The first thing I noticed wasn't the smell of roast chicken or the ridiculous cinnamon candle she burns every holiday. It was the silence. Colby was already seated at the table, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Dark circles, twitchy fingers, hoodie pulled low like he was hiding a hangover or a fight he didn't win. Dad didn't even look up from his tablet, which was odd because the man has opinions about screen time. My mom greeted me like she was trying to win an Oscar, asking about my car's mileage and my 401k, which she's never once cared about. I sat down at the table, already regretting coming, but curious enough to stay. The chicken was overcooked, which only happens when she's anxious. We ate in forced silence, forks scraping plates, nobody asking how work was. And then, after dessert, Dad cleared his throat like he was delivering a verdict. I braced myself. "Your brother's in trouble," he said, which wasn't exactly breaking news. Colby has always been a tornado in a hoodie. But then he added, "It's serious. $64,000. That's not a typo." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. I looked at Colby, who stared at his plate like it had betrayed him. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so goddamn predictable. Payday loans, high-interest credit cards, car notes on vehicles he couldn't afford. Colby always knew how to lose money without trying. Mom jumped in, rapid fire, explaining that it was a mix of rent, car repossession fees, payday apps, overdue credit cards, and utilities. Apparently, he hadn't paid a single bill in 6 months. Then Dad turned to me, calmly, like we were discussing a Netflix recommendation, and said, "You're the responsible one. You have savings. You need to fix this." I blinked. Wait, what? That wasn't a request. That was a sentence with a period. He meant it. Like this was some unspoken blood pact. Colby, the golden disaster, had once again torched his life, and now it was my job to reach for the fire extinguisher. I looked around the room, trying to figure out if anyone had lost their minds or if it was just me. My mom was wringing her hands, voice trembling, talking about how family supports each other and sacrifices when needed. She brought up all the things they'd done for me growing up, like feeding me as a child now obligated me to absorb someone else's financial suicide. I asked the obvious question, why wasn't this their problem? Why wasn't Colby facing any consequences? That's when Dad dropped the real bomb. They'd already mortgaged the house for him last year. Without telling me, without asking, just did it. Now they were out of options. It was my turn. He literally said that. Like being related to Colby was a timeshare of suffering. And Colby, finally lifting his head, had the audacity to say, "You always had it easy. You were the favorite. You never had to struggle." I almost stood up and walked out right then. "Struggle?" I repeated. "You think this is struggle? You buried yourself in debt and now want me to clean up the grave." My mom stood up so fast her chair scraped across the floor, eyes wide like I'd pulled a gun on the table. She said, "If you leave, you're walking out on this family forever." And that was it. I stood up, calmly pushed in my chair, grabbed my jacket, and walked to the door. Dad followed, grabbed my sleeve. I shook him off. Mom blocked the door like we were reenacting some hostage drama. She screamed, "If you go, you're not our son. You never were." Colby just smirked. Like this was justice. Like I was finally being dethroned from some pedestal I never asked for. I didn't respond. Didn't yell. Didn't cry. Just opened the door, walked out, and drove away. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Not from fear or regret, just rage. Pure, white-hot disbelief. I pulled into a gas station a few miles out, parked, and just sat there for a while. Read the last text from Mom over and over. Fix this or don't bother coming back. I didn't bother, but I did start thinking. Not about forgiveness or healing or any of that sentimental garbage. I started thinking about receipts. About every favor, every signature, every loan in my name. I remembered every time they said, "Just help us out," and I nodded because I didn't want to cause a scene. But now, I saw what that really was, a slow bleed. A paper trail of silent obligations they never planned to repay. And that was the first moment I realized. Maybe they wanted to erase me. Fine. I could beat them to it. When I went back to the house a week later to grab some leftover mail, it felt like walking into someone else's family photo album, one where I'd never existed. The wall by the staircase, where my school portraits used to hang, was stripped bare. Every frame with my face had disappeared. In their place, nothing. Just lighter paint patches like ghosts where I used to be. I stood there for a second too long, waiting to feel something, but all I felt was a strange, hollow silence. I walked past the living room and noticed new prints on the wall, Colby in a graduation gown he never earned, Colby holding a dog that wasn't his, Colby and my parents smiling at some lakeside rental I was never invited to. I didn't say a word. I just walked down the hallway to check if my name was still on the mailbox stacked by the entry table. That's when I heard her voice behind me, Mom, tone icy and flat like she'd rehearsed it. "You don't live here anymore. You made that choice." She didn't ask how I was. Didn't say she missed me. Just stood there, arms folded, like a landlord ready to change the locks. I asked her where my things were. She said they were packed in boxes in the garage if they hadn't already donated them. I asked why. She said, "We had to make space." I went to the garage. My mattress was leaning against the wall, no sheets. My boxes were stacked like inventory. The top one was half open, my old textbooks and a broken pair of headphones on top. I picked up my mail and started walking toward the door. Before I reached the handle, she stepped in front of me again. "You can come back," she said, voice trembling this time. "But you know what you have to do." I didn't answer, just stepped around her. She slammed the door behind me so hard the glass shook. 2 hours later, I got a notification, removed from the family group chat. No message. Just gone. I scrolled up. All my old messages were wiped. It looked like I'd never existed. That night, my cousin Maddie messaged me, asking if I was okay. She said my mom called her crying, said I was having some kind of breakdown, that I shouldn't be contacted until I'd calmed down. I told Maddie I was fine. She sounded surprised, like I'd broken character. Then it started spreading. More texts, more calls, people checking in not because they cared, but because they were told to. Apparently, my parents had started some quiet PR campaign, spinning a story where I'd snapped over nothing and stormed out in a fit of rage. They said I'd been acting unstable for weeks, that I was emotional, unwell, erratic. I wasn't even mad, just impressed by how fast they rewrote history. I started paying attention. My Spotify family plan, gone. No big deal. But then I couldn't log into our shared Apple account. Then the Amazon account we'd all used for years was canceled. Fine. I didn't need the free shipping. But it was the message behind it that hit harder, erase every trace, every convenience, every thread connecting me to them. When I dropped by the house one last time, just to grab a winter coat I'd forgotten, Colby met me at the door and leaned against the frame like he was the king of the castle. "You're out, man," he said, smug like he'd won a contest. "Get used to it." I didn't answer. Just stared at him for a few seconds, and he stepped aside. I grabbed my coat, ignored the fake smile my mom tried to throw over her shoulder, and left without looking back. A few days later, my cousin Sarah texted, said she'd gotten a weird voicemail from my mom talking about how I was off my meds, which was funny because I've never taken any. Then came the phone call from Uncle Brian. He said Mom told the family I'd had a break and that I wasn't to be involved in future gatherings until I got help. I knew what this was. They weren't angry. They were erasing me socially, digitally, personally. Making sure if anyone asked about the missing son at Christmas dinner, they had a nice tidy story about mental health to cover their backs. It would have worked too if I hadn't kept my receipts. That week, I dug through every old folder in my filing cabinet. every bill I'd co-signed, every payment I'd made for their car insurance, their utilities, even their old water heater replacement. I found my name on their phone plan. I was still technically paying for one of Colby's expired car loans. I even found my signature on an old home repair financing form from years ago. I remember Dad saying it would be easier if I signed since my credit was better. Like a fool, I agreed. So I started pulling the strings. First, I called the phone company and removed myself from the family plan. They said the account would reset, and all the lines would either be disconnected or migrated to individual bills. I said that was fine. Next, I called the auto insurance company, asked them to remove me as co-holder. The rep said it would raise their rates significantly. I said that sounded like a them problem. Then I emailed the bank that held the home repair loan and sent them a formal request to release me from responsibility. They said Colby would need to refinance. I sent him a screenshot and nothing else. Within days, the fallout began. First, a voicemail from Mom, soft-voiced and tearful, asking if we could just talk. Then Dad tried calling twice. I didn't answer. Then Colby sent me a middle finger emoji and nothing else. Then the utility bills started hitting my apartment mailbox. Apparently, their water, gas, and trash accounts were all still in my name. I hadn't even realized it. I went online, logged into the accounts, and submitted formal withdrawal forms. Each company said the primary account holders would be notified that transfer of service was required or shutoff would begin. I got another voicemail, this time screaming. Mom was furious. "You're sabotaging us," she said. "You're destroying your own family." I played it back twice. Not because I was hurt. Just to confirm that yes, she really said destroying, as if I was the villain in her fairy tale. The next day, Colby was parked outside my building, blasting music like he was trying to provoke me into something stupid. When I walked out to grab groceries, he rolled down his window and said, "You think you're smart. You're just screwing over Mom and Dad, not me." I kept walking. He got out, tried to shove me. I shoved him back harder. A neighbor on the second floor yelled at us to take it somewhere else. Colby called me a psycho and peeled off down the street like a teenager in a burnout video. Later, I got a text from Dad, long-winded and dramatic, saying I needed to remember what family means. Said I was being cruel and selfish. Said I had no idea what they'd sacrificed for me. I didn't reply. Instead, I called my Aunt Lana, one of the only people in the family with a functioning brain. I told her the whole story. She listened quietly, then sighed and said, "They're telling people you've lost it, that you're dangerous. But honestly, most of us are tired of their crap." She said the group chat had become a mess. Half the family was confused. The other half just didn't care. "Your mom keeps spinning stories," Lana added. "She's not trying to fix anything. She's trying to stay in control." That's when I knew this wasn't about money anymore. This was about narrative, power, optics. I wasn't just the son who refused to help. I was the villain now, the betrayer, the one they could rally against to hold their shaky unity together. Fine. They wanted a clean break. I'd give it to them, with sharp edges. I started documenting every single message, voicemail, call, and statement. Screenshots, voice memos, PDFs. Not because I needed legal leverage, but because I wanted the truth written somewhere that couldn't be twisted. They thought they could erase me quietly. They had no idea I'd make the silence echo. I expected silence once the bills hit their doorstep, but instead the chaos escalated. The week after I pulled my name from every utility, loan, and shared account, my phone lit up with unknown numbers like roaches crawling out from under a flipped couch. First, it was the energy company, then the water provider, then a notice from the trash collection service saying the account holder needed to update billing details or service would stop next week. I didn't reply to a single message from my parents. Not when my dad texted, "You've gone too far," or when my mom left voicemails crying into the speaker like she was auditioning for a soap opera. I knew what I was doing wasn't cruel. It was surgical. A methodical severing of every invisible cord they'd tied around me without permission. But apparently, they weren't prepared to actually live without me. They just wanted to threaten to. The voicemails got worse. One minute Mom was begging, the next she was accusing. "You've destroyed our lives," she said. "You're punishing us for no reason." She didn't mention the dinner. Didn't mention calling me mentally unstable. Didn't acknowledge erasing my photos or telling relatives I'd lost my mind. just crocodile tears and shifting blame. Then came Colby. He tried to call, which I let ring out. Then he texted, "You're a pathetic loser. Nobody ever liked you." 5 minutes later, he followed it up with a photo of their electric bill and the words, "Nice work, genius." That's when I knew it was working. Not out of spite, but because consequences were finally landing where they were supposed to. I stopped answering calls altogether. If someone had something to say, they could put it in writing. I wanted records, patterns, proof of what was happening in real time. I created a folder on my desktop labeled Erasure. Every screenshot went there. Every email, message, screenshot, and voicemail. It became my own personal archive of delusion, desperation, and denial. Then something shifted. I started getting calls from extended relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. My Aunt Camilla reached out, said my mom told her I was refusing to speak to anyone because of some delusional story I made up. I told her I wasn't delusional, I just wasn't dumb anymore. Camilla didn't say much after that, but it was clear the narrative had spread beyond our immediate circle. Mom was working the phones, telling every cousin, uncle, neighbor, and friend that I was mentally deteriorating and lashing out for no reason. And when that didn't get sympathy, she started telling them I was financially abusive, that I was withholding money I owed them, that I'd stolen credit. Meanwhile, I was sitting on my couch with a spreadsheet showing the opposite. I sent formal letters, physical, signed copies, to the utility companies, insurance agencies, and lenders, each one confirming my exit from every shared financial obligation. I included dates, account numbers, and clauses. Everything above board. My name was now clean. If they tried to rope me back in, they'd have to commit fraud to do it. That's when the pressure ramped up. Dad left a voicemail saying he'd make sure everyone knows what kind of person I really am. I saved that one in a subfolder labeled Threats. Then Colby started showing up again, this time on foot. The first time, he waited across the street from my apartment, pacing back and forth like a bouncer denied entry to his own ego. I watched from the window as he texted me "coward" 6 times in a row, then called, left a blank voicemail, and walked off 10 minutes later. The second time, he followed me from the grocery store back home and yelled across the parking lot, asking if I felt like a big man now. I didn't answer. Just walked inside, locked the door, and let him stew in his own mess. That night, I blocked his number and added him to the building's watch for harassment list. The super said if he tried again, he'd call the cops. Then I got the real bombshell. The bank I'd withdrawn from called to confirm someone tried to use my credentials to open a new credit line. It had been flagged because the details didn't match. I asked when it happened. They told me it was the same day Colby showed up outside my building. I sent them a formal letter denying authorization, asked them to freeze any request from my parents' address. They complied, said if it happened again, they'd escalate it. Now I knew what they were willing to do. Not just manipulation, not just emotional blackmail. They were ready to cross legal lines just to keep their narrative intact. Around that time, I heard from Lana again. She said the family group chat was imploding. People had questions. Some were angry at me. Others were furious at my parents. My mom had apparently posted a Facebook status about losing a son to cruelty and pride. My Uncle Dave screenshotted it and sent it to me with the caption, "She's finally snapped." I didn't even respond. What was the point? Let them melt down in public. Every accusation just made them look more unstable. I still hadn't said a word publicly, but I was about to change that. I wrote an email, not to my parents, but to the rest of the family. Bullet points, dates, screenshots, every loan, every favor, every shared bill. I told them I wasn't unstable. I wasn't angry. I was just done being used like an extra limb that could cut off when it got inconvenient. I attached the spreadsheet showing every payment I'd made on their behalf, every loan signed under my name, every financial tie they never asked permission for. I ended it with one line: "I will not accept contact from them unless it begins with an apology." Some cousins responded with support. A few were shocked. One sent me a message saying, "Honestly, I always knew something was off." But others doubled down. One cousin said, "You could have handled it privately." Another accused me of humiliating your own mother for clout. I ignored them. They weren't mad because I was wrong. They were mad because I refused to play along. Days later, I got another voicemail from Dad. His voice sounded hoarse, worn down, not angry but tired. "You think you've won. But you've lost your family. This isn't over. I saved that one, too. Meanwhile, Colby's car got repossessed. I found out through a mutual friend who worked at the tow yard. I guess he missed payments after I cut out. The same friend told me Colby blamed me directly, said I'd sabotaged his life, that I'd ripped everything away from him. I laughed when I heard that. I didn't rip anything away. I just let him carry his own weight for the first time in his life. My mom sent me a text the next day. Your brother's future is in ruins because of you. I stared at it, then closed the message without replying. She'd never seen him clearly. Not once. Not when he crashed Dad's truck. Not when he drained their savings. Not when he lied about getting fired. She believed his every excuse, every lie, every promise to turn things around. And now, with the safety net gone, she wanted to blame the pavement. I started walking more after that. Not because I was anxious, but because I needed fresh air to think. One afternoon, I passed by a family taking photos in the park, 2 kids, both boys, both laughing like they had no idea what parents were capable of. I didn't feel sad. I just felt distance. A kind of peaceful, frigid clarity. Like I'd finally stepped outside the blizzard and could see the storm for what it was. They wanted me erased. So I started writing my own name in ink. I waited for things to settle, but they didn't. Instead, the chaos mutated. It wasn't just resentment anymore. It was full-on desperation wrapped in fake concern. The next wave started with a letter, yes, an actual letter, in my dad's handwriting, sloppy and rushed like he'd written it half drunk or half mad. It didn't say much. Just, you need to fix this. Things are getting serious. You're making a mistake. There was no apology, no acknowledgement, just pressure disguised as fatherly advice. I read it once, folded it twice, and threw it into the trash without another thought. I was done playing audience to their panic. The same day, Colby left a voicemail saying he couldn't apply for a new loan because his credit had tanked. He blamed me, like I had sabotaged his life by refusing to keep carrying it. I didn't reply, but it was hard not to laugh when he said, "You'll regret this when you're alone and no one cares." I've been alone for a while now, and honestly, it was quieter, cleaner, and so much easier to breathe without the noise of people who only saw me as a solution to their latest crisis. Then Mom called my Aunt Lana again, saying they were worried I'd gone off the rails. Lana called me after, sounding more tired than concerned, said, "Your mom's telling people you're mentally unstable." Again, she's crying on the phone daily now, telling the family you're tearing everything apart. I asked Lana if she believed her, and she hesitated before saying, "I want to believe you, but it's hard when everything's so messy." I told her, "It's messy because they made it that way." She didn't argue. The next hit came fast. Their insurance company sent them a notice, premium tripled. Without my name on the policy, they were flagged as a high-risk household. Apparently, I'd been the one keeping them in the affordable range all these years. I found out because Mom texted me in a rage, saying, "You're destroying your own family's safety. This isn't just about us anymore." As if I was the arsonist for taking back the matches they'd borrowed. Colby showed up at my apartment again, but this time I didn't even bother answering the intercom. I let him scream into the speaker until one of the neighbors yelled at him to shut up or get arrested. He left me a string of texts after that, each one more unhinged than the last. Accused me of ruining his life, said I was heartless, a traitor, then ended with, "You were never one of us anyway." That one actually made me laugh. If I was never part of them, then why did they keep trying to pull me back in? Later that week, I got word from another friend that my parents tried opening a new joint line of credit using my name again. Same bank, same error. This time, the system blocked it immediately. I called the fraud department, verified everything, and had them lock any account tied to my name. If they tried again, it would trigger an alert. They were still trying to rebuild their tower of lies using bricks they'd stolen from my foundation. That weekend, I started noticing little shifts in the extended family's tone. Some people stopped responding to texts. A few cousins unfollowed me on social media. One even messaged me saying, "I think you're taking this too far. Maybe just sit down and talk to them." I told her, "You're welcome to pay their bills if you believe they're so misunderstood." She didn't reply. People weren't choosing sides because they understood the full picture. They were choosing based on who made them more comfortable. Mom posted some long Facebook update about letting go of toxic energy and how forgiveness is the path forward. But it wasn't vague enough to hide who it was about. My Uncle Dave screenshotted it and sent it to me with a single line. They're crumbling. I didn't comment, didn't respond. I just added it to my file, kept my head down, and stayed patient. I knew the final collapse was coming. They'd built their lives on borrowed structure, and now the beams were snapping one by one. My final move wasn't loud. It wasn't revenge. It was just the truth, wrapped in documentation. I mailed a certified packet to both my parents, one to Aunt Lana and one to Uncle Dave. Inside was everything, every signed form, every withdrawn authorization, every payment I'd made for them over the last decade. Car loans, utility bills, insurance, phone plans, home repair financing. I highlighted the totals. I listed the dates. I included copies of emails showing I'd stepped back legally. No emotion, no accusations, just proof. The last page had one sentence. Do not contact me again unless you're ready to take responsibility. 3 days later, the calls began. I ignored every one. Dad left a voicemail saying, "What the hell is this?" As if he hadn't read it, as if the numbers didn't mean anything. Mom texted me begging to talk. Said she didn't mean it. Said they were just scared. Said Colby was going through something and they didn't know what else to do. The desperation was thick in her words. I didn't reply. Then came the messages from other relatives, cousins I hadn't seen in years, friends of the family, even an old neighbor. Each one was a variation of the same theme. We heard what's going on. Hope you're okay. Some sounded supportive. Others were clearly fishing for gossip. I told the ones who mattered the truth. To the others, I said nothing. I wasn't here to win points. I was just done being the fall guy. The next night, my cousin Kate messaged me saying, the family group chat is falling apart. People are leaving. Everyone's arguing about who did what and when. Apparently, Uncle Dave finally called out my dad directly, said he was tired of watching him destroy people for pride. Aunt Lana backed him. A few others didn't say much but left the chat quietly. My parents were no longer the sinner. They were the problem everyone had quietly tolerated for too long. And yet, even now, they wouldn't say sorry. They wouldn't admit anything. They'd rather burn the bridge and claim it collapsed on its own. I started getting fewer messages after that. The dust was settling. My name wasn't being brought up as often. Even Colby went quiet, probably because he was too busy trying to fix the mess without a safety net. I hadn't heard from him since he tried yelling through my door, and frankly, that was the best outcome I could have hoped for. When I checked my email one morning, I saw a final message from the insurance company confirming full account closure. That was the last thread, the final chord. I closed the laptop, leaned back in my chair, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was bracing for the next blow. It wasn't over, not emotionally, but the campaign was done. The structure was down. They couldn't touch me anymore. They'd wanted a clean break. Now they had one. I figured once the letters landed, there'd be screaming, maybe threats, but I wasn't ready for what came next. The certified documents hit their mailbox 2 days after I got confirmation, and like I expected, my phone started buzzing nonstop before I even finished my coffee. 12 missed calls. 4 voicemails. 1 from Dad, 3 from Mom. Then came the texts. "We need to talk, please," followed by, "What is this supposed to mean?" And eventually, "You're blowing things out of proportion, Travis." I didn't respond to a single one. I already said everything I had to say in ink, certified and dated. Then came the fallout, the part they never saw coming. Not just emotionally, but practically, every system they'd quietly leaned on for years was crumbling beneath them. I timed the packet to hit the same day their monthly utilities were due. Electric bill overdue. Water shut-off scheduled. Internet flagged for non-payment. Insurance policy flagged for triple rate adjustment because of risk reassessment without my name attached. I didn't feel cruel. I felt calm, focused. I hadn't torched the house. I just stopped holding the roof up alone. By noon that day, my cousin Lorenzo sent me a DM on Instagram. "Dude, your mom's blowing up my phone. She said she needs to talk to you or else they're ruined." I replied with a screenshot of the final letter, and all I wrote was, "Then they should have thought of that." He didn't respond. He didn't have to. He knew. For the first time, people weren't just hearing my side, they were seeing it in detail, black and white, impossible to twist or misinterpret. I wasn't being dramatic. I was documenting the truth with timestamps. That same afternoon, my Aunt Lana called. She sounded out of breath, like she'd just finished a sprint or escaped a room full of angry people. Travis, your mom is falling apart, she said. She's crying to everyone, saying you're tearing the family to pieces. I told her calmly she started this. I just took my name off the wreckage. Lana paused for a while and finally said, I don't agree with everything, but I get it now. I really do. It wasn't an apology, but it was close enough for me to say, thanks for not letting them rewrite it. Colby, of course, handled it like he always does, by showing up uninvited and unhinged. He came to my building again, but this time he didn't even buzz. Just screamed up at my window like some medieval idiot. You happy now? You proud of yourself? I didn't respond. He threw something, maybe a lighter, at the side door and peeled out in his junk car, tires screeching like he was in some movie. 10 minutes later, I got a photo on my phone from an unknown number. His car, booted and tagged, with a middle finger emoji attached. I didn't even react. I'd stopped giving him energy long ago. But the real shift came that night. My grandma, the only one in the family who never picked sides and never raised her voice, called me just before dinner. She didn't say much at first, just asked how I was doing, what I'd been eating, how work was going. Then she said, I'm sorry for what they did. You didn't deserve that. That landed harder than anything else all month. I sat there, stunned, because she never gets involved. For her to call me meant it had finally hit her too, that all this time, I was never the storm. I was just the first one to stop pretending it wasn't raining. A few days later, I heard from Kate again. She said the family group chat had officially split. Half the people left. Others muted it. A few cousins unfriended my mom on Facebook, which for people in that generation is practically exile. Apparently, my dad tried to call a family meeting, and nobody showed up. The weight of the silence hit harder than any confrontation could. You can't guilt people when no one's listening anymore. My parents tried applying for another loan, but their credit was so wrecked they didn't even qualify for a secured card. The bank flagged the application when they listed a frozen cosigner profile, mine. One of my friends from college now works at that bank. He sent me a heads-up message, said, they're desperate. You did the right thing getting out. And I knew he was right. Every part of me that used to feel doubt had been replaced with this grounded certainty that I'd waited too long already. The last contact I ever got from my parents came in a single envelope, hand-addressed, thick with crumpled paper and something that felt like desperation. I opened it slowly, half expecting venom, but inside was a 3-page letter from my mom. It was messy, half apology, half plea, full of excuses dressed up as reasons. She said they panicked. She said Colby had issues they didn't know how to handle. She said they didn't mean to hurt me. She said, we were scared, and we chose wrong. Please call. I didn't. I folded it neatly, slipped it into the back of the file with the rest, and moved on. If they'd really wanted peace, they'd have started with truth. But it was always about control, about convenience, about keeping the illusion alive that everything was normal so long as I stayed quiet and obedient. I had no interest in walking back into a fire just because they'd finally noticed the heat. I wish I could say I felt triumphant, but really, I just felt done. Like the chapter had turned itself without waiting for permission. I cleaned out old emails, closed lingering shared accounts, scrubbed my name from anything that connected back to them. Then I took a day off work and did something completely unremarkable. I walked along the river, bought a bagel, and sat on a bench doing nothing for once. No stress. No messages waiting. No silent weight on my shoulders that I hadn't agreed to carry. That's the thing people don't talk about when it comes to walking away from family. They act like there's this huge dramatic finale, like someone's supposed to beg you to come back or curse your name forever. But most of the time, it just fades. You stop answering. They stop calling. And the silence becomes a kind of answer in itself. Not an ending, but a boundary. One that finally holds. So that's where it ends. Not with a bang, but with clarity. They tried to erase me first. Said I was never their son. Told people I was sick, broken, unstable. All I did was believe them. And I walked. Not out of hatred, but out of self-respect. You don't owe people your loyalty just because you share blood. You owe it to yourself to survive without being someone else's sacrifice. Let them miss me. Let them regret it. Let them sit in the house they built without my help. I gave them every chance to treat me like a son. All they saw was a safety net. Now they get to find out what free fall really feels like.